A new set of figures has revealed a sharp rise in the number of children waiting years for vital speech and language therapy services, with some delays now stretching beyond 2 years. The growing backlog is raising serious concerns about the impact on children's development and the pressure on families and frontline staff. To discuss what's behind these delays and what it means in practice, I'm joined now by Clare O'Loughlin of Clare Speech Therapy, and from Clare Crusaders, Ann Norton. And thanks to both of you for joining me this morning. And Clare, from a clinician's point of view, what happens when a child waits 1 or even 2 years for intervention? And these delays now, does that highlight just how critical early intervention in speech and language development is?
Hi Alan, thanks for having me on the show, and hi Anne. Yes, we know that early intervention is crucial for children. It's incredibly disappointing and frustrating for us as clinicians to be facing the demand for services that's there. There's simply a shortage of speech and language therapists in the country, and we're just unable to meet the demand for services.
And what do you make of this 149% rise? What are you seeing on the ground, and are you seeing children reaching school age without even having had an initial assessment?
Yeah, unfortunately Alan.
Sorry, that one was for Anne.
Oh,
hello, Anne, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry there. Unfortunately, yes, we are seeing it, and it is something that we have seen, year on year. But when you have waiting lists, it's very difficult to actually get to the waiting lists. So they're increasing. Speech and language therapy is one of the higher demands, I think, of the disciplines that parents would be looking for. Communication is the one area that parents want to see their children, progressing in. I think a lot of parents feel if their child actually has speech, it will make life a lot more easier for them. But unfortunately, the demand is there. It has been there for a long time now, and we don't have enough speech and language therapists within the private sector, and we don't have it within the public sector either.
So even if families are frustrated with how their experience of the public sector, going for private speech therapy as a result of these delays isn't exactly resulting in a good alternative for them.
Unfortunately not. We don't seem to have the balance. Do we look at it is that there isn't enough speech and language therapists graduating, or we'd always ask the question, or the younger generation immigrating, to see what life is looks like outside their own country. But we all have been looking for solutions for this for a very long time, but unfortunately, it's not an easy fix. But I still feel that there is a responsibility, on the HSE to actually put more clinicians in place to try and look at more speech and language therapy for children. But unfortunately, an assessment of needs is one of the first things that parents look for. The Minister announced a number of months ago that was something that she was looking at, and that might not be a necessity, and that is going to put huge pressure on the public sector and also the private sector.
Okay. Just to bring Clare back in, over 36,000 children waiting for some form of speech therapy, and Anne's been talking there about staff shortages clearly playing a part in that. The recruitment caps and funding constraints as well, are they exacerbating the situation, Clare? And are they having any impact on your ability to provide services?
Well, I think Anne mentioned the point of university places. So there is a shortage of places at third level for people to study speech and language therapy. And the difficulty with increasing the number of places is that you need a substantial amount of clinical placement for each student. And it's very difficult for the universities to secure student placements because most departments are understaffed already. And so increasing the number of places for third level students puts further pressure on already challenging circumstances securing those placements. So I'm not sure if it's something that could be explored or is being explored, looking at placements overseas. Ireland is part of the mutual recognition of association credentials with the UK, America, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. And what that means is that the qualification and the scope of practice that we have here in Ireland is recognised as being in keeping with the professional associations with the other 5 signatory countries. And so maybe third level students could undergo placements in the UK or beyond. It certainly is something that I think needs to be looked at in terms of increasing the number of graduates that we have to sort of close the gap between the shortage of therapists and the demand for the services.
Okay. And is that, I suppose, one possible solution, or maybe the only one at the moment, given it's going to take a serious recruitment campaign to help address that list of over 36,000 children? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I also, recruitment is going to be an issue, but the reality is there is speech and language therapists out there, and they need to be employed first and foremost, and regardless, there is a responsibility on the HSC, and they need to do a bigger recruitment drive on the likes of speech and language therapy. I think, unfortunately, there's so many areas within the HSC, and when issues arise, they look at one particular issue. I think we need to start putting pressure on the HSC to look at primary care. We need for them to look at the demand, the likes of these results coming out and the figures, and pressure needs to be put on. At the end of the day, if children get intervention early, it will help them as they get older. So the earlier they get intervention, the less problems that they might have as they go through, their life. But if we don't get intervention, there's a pocket of time that children need this therapy, and I think we need to focus on putting the interventions in place. Like the amount of parents that I speak to on a daily basis that are so frustrated because they're continuously hearing about waiting lists, and they're waiting on appointments, and then when they get appointments, they're cancelled. And if they're not available on the particular day that they are offered their appointment, if something arises, they're put on the back of the waiting list, and that is so disheartening for families, because every parent wants to give their child the best start in life, and when you're being told there is a waiting list, it is very, very difficult. And speech and language therapy is an area that parents need support in. It isn't something that they can just pick up.
Of course, but there's obviously difficulties in getting them that support. And Claire, you've both highlighted hiring more therapists would be crucial, but we're not just seeing backlogs for assessments, but also therapy after assessment. So that would suggest perhaps the system isn't set up in a way that would avoid these delays. So are structural reforms needed as well? And if so, how much more difficult does it make coming up with solutions?
Well, we're on the back of the rollout of the progressive disability services across the country, where disability network teams were set up, and there was a shift in the direction that care pathways went between primary care and the disability services. So I don't think restructuring the service is the solution. I think we're starting to see very small progress as the progressive disability services have started to settle. And also the Department of Education and Youth has started introducing an education therapy service, which is initially introducing speech and language therapy and occupational therapy services within special schools, and it's intended that that will extend to special classes and mainstream settings. So I'm optimistic that things are starting to improve, and I'm certainly hoping that that will be the case.
In the final minute we have, Anne, I'll finish with yourself. Would you be as optimistic as Clare?
Well, I would like to see that the Department of Education actually get more involved. I think if we could get the speech and language therapists and occupational therapists, as part of the school system, that it would actually help hugely, and the supports that the schools would get would benefit everyone. It would take the pressure off the HSE, but it would also help the teachers, the SNAs and parents if the children were receiving the services within the school. And it's something that I've been saying for years. I think the Department of Education should have a responsibility, and they should be rolling this out a lot quicker. Okay. And I think everybody would benefit from it, and then the HSE could focus on the younger generation, as in the babies, and then we then would look at the older services, because there's a lot of older people out there that are in the same predicament. Unfortunately, this is not just in one section of our community. This is hitting young and old, unfortunately, but something needs to be done. And Alan, it's highlighting it, and I really appreciate the fact that you are doing a piece today, because people need to know the difficulties that families are going through and the demand that has been put on them. And the only way we know that the government will do something is if we put pressure on them.
Okay, well, look, I'm very happy to highlight it is an important issue, and something needs to be done when you have that many children still waiting for speech and language therapy or an assessment. My thanks to Ann Norton there from Clare Crusaders, and also Claire O'Loughlin from Clare Speech Therapy.